Hello, everyone. Welcome to the PodBrother Show. As you can see with my background here, I've got a couple of labels going on. Today, I kind of want to focus a little bit on my stand-up comedy fundraising efforts through the PNN Academy. Some of you might already know that we do teach stand-up comedy in our PNN Academy. I'm a stand-up comic of 40 years, so I've got a little bit of knowledge in how that works. And I'm always excited to pick up new instructors, new experts, new people who are really smart and experienced in what they do. And that's basically what this show is about. I discovered my ghost writing wife to be, my Nikki Hernandez. We had a chance to talk on the OWL app, which is a very cool app if you haven't heard of it. It's OWWLL. It's an app that allows experts to share their expertise for a few extra dollars. And you can go on there and you can see what expert you want to call and ask questions about. And I saw Nikki was on as a teacher, as a ghostwriter, and I am producing a comedy documentary film, and I'm also writing my first book. So I thought it would be really interesting to kind of pick her brain to see what we could possibly do with my comedy book. And we ended up talking for 45 minutes to an hour, was it, Nikki?
Yeah, it was a quite long conversation, but it was well worth it.
Yeah, it was really good. We went back and forth with some really cool ideas, and I want to bring you into some of the projects that I'm doing right now, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit today. But Nikki, how are you?
I am doing wonderful, and I feel even better to be here today. So thank you for allowing me to come on your show.
Yeah, well, thanks for taking the time out to actually come on my show because I've been
Of
looking
course.
forward to this for a whole week because that
Yes,
conversation we
we have.
had
I've
was
had it penciled
so
in
cool.
my agenda right here.
That's a pretty big agenda book you got going there.
Yeah, I made it. It's on Amazon.
Oh, that's cool. My director of my comedy doc, she also made her planner. It's about as thick as a phone book, and I took that and I kind of retrofitted it into my PNN stand-up comedy workshop planner. For those who take the workshop, they get this PDF planner for free, and it's pretty cool. It's very organized things. It allows you to basically start your career and keep it organized for the rest of your life. So it's a pretty cool thing.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about, before we dive too deep in some of the things I want to talk about, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm a teacher by trade. I've been doing that for 10 years, just finished up. We had our last day yesterday, in fact. And so tomorrow is our last day for teachers for this year. And then school's out for the summer, like the song says. So that is a little bit about me and what I do for my day job. And then in 2020, when things kind of went a little haywire, I guess you could say, I decided to start a business and pursue entrepreneurship, although I wasn't 100% sure what that looked like. And at first, I thought that I was going to be best suited for helping teachers because I am one and I know the daily struggles that we face. So I decided that I would pursue that for a little while, but it really wasn't as lucrative as I wanted it to be. So while I was in the midst of that, I was also writing a book on Gen Z. And once I got that published and then I wrote my second book, I said, I really need to be doing a lot more of this. I need to be cranking out books. But one of the best ways to help people crank out books is not just to write them yourself, but to write other people's books yourself. And so that's what happened. I was very fortunate to have acquired my first client very quickly on Facebook. He had posted an ad saying he needed a ghostwriter. I DM'd him. We met for about 30 minutes. It was a match made in heaven. We got the book done, and I've been doing books steadily ever since.
That's a beautiful story. That's great. And each one you do, you find that the evolution of how to do it gets better and faster and cleaner and tighter in that process. Are you finding that to be something exciting? Each one that you do?
Yes, every single book is different in its own way, and I would kind of liken writing books for other individuals as like getting a college education, even better actually, because you learn so much about the world, how the world works in various industries, things that you never knew before, things that you're certainly never going to learn in school. So by interviewing these individuals and learning more, like you when we spoke on the phone and learning more about comedy and, how you got to where you were, it really opened my eyes to that world. And that's what happens with every single book.
That is very cool. After we talked, I was really, really excited. I have probably 500 tapes that I am going to pull, never before seen footage for the documentary film. But in scanning those tapes, I'm also rediscovering some of those moments and those stories and those characters that I ran into that could be full chapters on their own. So, I think you might have several books out of me with all the stories that I have, because I have a lot of tapes. I have a lot of comedy flyers and posters. I've worked on cruise ships and comedy clubs and air shows, and I've toured this country with rock bands, and I've been on TV and radio and film, and so I think there's more than enough stuff to pull from, and I'm excited to dive into that with you. Tell me a little bit about the process, because I'm looking at probably like 40 years of my life that I have been involved in comedy. um, where you start from the beginning and just kind of roll your way through. Do you divide it up into decades? Do you divide it up into months? Do you divide it up into key stories? Like, what would be the strategy you would take for someone like me who is looking to do write a book about my journey in comedy, which could be something that could echo the documentary film or precede the documentary film, or whatever. What would your strategy be in kind of organizing your thoughts around my book?
Yes, absolutely. And I always love to be honest with my clients. And so I don't have the answer to that today or right now of what I would do with that book. As far as strategy goes, though, you and I would sit down together and we would spend a significant time conversing about the book, just talking about different ideas, potential options that we could use for the book. And we would basically just keep talking until we landed on something that fit. And we were both like, that's it, that's the moment that I'm looking for, and so that's what we would do until we figured it out, and then we would start basically the interview process from there, and I would start writing. We would also do a test project. Test projects are really, really, really important for the ghostwriter and for the client because you have to see if the person who you're working with is the right fit for you. So, for example, there's an individual who I have a contract pending with him, and his story is really unique, but he is like you. He's an African American man. I am partially African American, but I certainly didn't grow up in that culture and I didn't grow up in that world. So he has a unique story that really has a lot of cultural nuance to it, things that I just don't have from my own life experience. And that's really important. So we sat on the phone and I just asked him plain out, because I'm not the type of person who's going to try to over talk or over explain something in these big fancy words. I just asked him flat out, do you think it's appropriate that and essentially a white woman is writing a book on behalf of a black man? And so he was like, no, I want you. And I was like, okay, just want to make sure that you've got a clear mind about this. So, it was a really interesting conversation, but, him and I had to go back and forth on a lot of different things. And I want my clients to push back and I want to push back on them as well. And it makes for a great book.
That is awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the process of uh, grinding it down to, how we want to work, what we want to do, how we want to do it. I've always been a person who has enjoyed the process of things, and I have a real strong vision. I have clear and vivid imagination. I have strong fantasy, so my third mind's eye is pretty vivid and colorful and clear with a lot of things that I want to do. And I think working with you, you'll be able to kind of, hone down or hone into the best essence of whatever's going on in my mind and what's been happening with as far as some of my experiences. Um, so tell me a little bit about um, you as a teacher. So how did you get into teaching in the first place? Like, I'm always curious how people land where they land, and it's interesting to hear some backstories on how people become the professionals and the experts that they are. How did you land on being a teacher?
A bad marriage. So that happened, and then I moved back home, and I was waitressing. I was doing a little like lots of odd jobs in between just to figure out like what the heck was I going to do. And I've always been a gifted teacher my whole life. My grandma has always told me that. I've always known that. I used to play, instead of playing house, I wanted to play school, stuff like that. So that has always been in my blood. And so once the end of that era happened, I said, what am I doing? Like, I've got to become a teacher. Like, this is what I need to do. So I had already had my degree. And, by the grace of God, one of the classes that I was taking had a volunteer component to it. It wasn't student teaching. It was just you had to volunteer and get a certain number of hours out of school, observing, things like that. And so I was actually stationed at the school that I grew up in. It was the school that I graduated from. That was the school that I was placed in. And so I worked with my 8th grade English teacher. That was who I was stationed to be with. And I was like, wow, everything is coming full circle. So the principal of that school was being promoted to the high school, and he called me and he said, hey, we've got this position open at the high school. Would you be interested in applying for it? So I did. And like I said, grace to God, I was hired, and I've been doing that for the past 10 years. I don't know if that made sense. While he's doing that, I'm going to charge my computer. Give me 1 second. My battery is getting low, so hold on 1 second.
Sorry about that. I had somebody knocking at my door. I got to charge my battery as well, so stand by.
Life happens. Okay, I've got it. There we go. It was like energy saver mode. I was like, oh no, I'm in trouble.
Okay, sorry about that. I had to replace my battery as well, or my cord, and then my partner here has got to go to the airport, and his ride is not here yet. Wanted to know if I had heard anything. So we are back.
Life
So sorry about
happens.
that little minor disruption.
No,
So
life happens fast.
yeah, looks like we're gonna have to edit some of that out anyway, or keep it real.
Or keep it real.
So yeah, so let's go back and finish up where you can finish up based on where I kind of was able to grab where you left off. So you had mentioned that you had your degree already and you were taking classes, and there was one of your classmates had an opportunity for some volunteer work, and it happened to be working with some students or a school or something along
Yeah.
those lines. Am I close?
Close, yeah. So what happened was I was taking a class to become a teacher, and there was a volunteer component. and the coordinators of the program would place you in a school in your local area. And so because I was living at home, I was close to the school that I graduated from, and that was where I was placed. I had no idea I was going to get placed there. I thought I'd get placed in one of the city schools that's also close by, but it turns out I was placed at the school that I graduated from. So I already knew the culture. You know, it hadn't been too long since I had graduated anyway. So, you know, I was ready to go and step into that position. But when I was volunteering there, I was working with my 8th grade English teacher, and her and I had a great time together. She knew me as a student. I had deep respect for her as a teacher and a mentor. And the principal of that school was being promoted to the high school at that time, and there was an open position. So he called me over the summer because we had a chance to get to know each other as a volunteer. And he called me and asked if I wanted to apply for the open position. So I said yes, and was, you know, by the grace of God, I was able to get it.
That's really cool. That's awesome. And
Things
now
just work out.
now here you are. So we talked a little bit about when we were on the owl call about some of the things you're excited about doing with your students. One of the things that I suggested is that you get some Hollywood scripts and you do some table readings with some of your students so that they can understand how to write in a screenplay paradigm. And and I think you had some ideas of how cool that might be for some of your students. So, what's your take on how would you feel about organizing a program for your students that would be a table read, and the students could actually like read an actual blockbuster screenplay as the actors while you play the film. You turn the volume down and let them do
Mhm.
the lines. And tell me, what you think your take would be on, even assigning some of your students to write some screenplays that could actually be done by your students to table read them.
Well, I can say that your idea of doing that was so wonderful. And I hope that it does get done this year with the students because, you know, the generation that we're moving into is Gen Alpha, and they're all about that. They're all about that creative element and self expression. And they've got big, bold personalities. So I have no doubt in my mind that a screen, like a table reading of a blockbuster film with it playing in the background, would go extremely well. I believe that wholeheartedly. And the other thing that you mentioned about having the students write the screenplay, I think that would go really well too, because as we spoke about on the phone, there was an assignment that one of the teachers at my school gave her students, and they had to rewrite a scene from Romeo and Juliet, but from the modern era. And then they were able to place themselves in the play and in the story. And students who had initially really very little interest in writing, because it was personalized, they grew attached to the story and they wanted it to keep going and keep going and keep going and push themselves even further. So they wrote these amazing stories and they got good grades on them. And it just goes to show you that the power of writing and storytelling is still very much alive.
That is cool. Do you think the students from this generation can relate to what's going on right now in film and TV? Um, there has been an attempt to try to insert some diversity and some inclusion with storyline, characters, gender identification, um, race, uh, um, character reinvention, if you will. What what's your feedback on students on what's your how can I word this? Um, what's
Just keep
your
it real.
takeaway? What's your takeaway on students' takeaway on what they're watching on movies and TVs today?
You know, that's a really good question. And I feel a little bit divided in my answer because my experience with Gen Zers has been very different than my experience with Gen Alphas, which is still very new because they're young and they're just coming up to me. So I haven't had a ton of experience working with them except for the chance to observe their very big, bold personalities, which I'm a huge fan of. With Gen Zers, as we talked about on the phone, you know, watching these films has been great for them. It's been a great experience for them. I think for the first time, there's this one particular show we watch in my class called El Internado, which means the boarding school. And that's like all they want to do. They get so into it. And it's such a fantastic show. It really makes you feel something. And with Gen Zers, that is a big deal because that generation is not very expressive when it comes to emotions. And that generation is also not, they don't really practice identifying what it is that they actually feel. And so when they watch El Internado and other emotionally riveting shows where they've got these, these characters who are multifaceted and complex people, it makes them think, which ultimately is what you want as a teacher, and you want to have those open conversations and dialogues. But as I had mentioned to you on the phone, I was having some trouble in my head, some conflict in my own head about some of their reactions to scenes that had happened in the show that we were watching. And one in particular was one we had discussed, where there was this really important pivotal scene where the main character was discovering something about his family history that was like earth shattering. I mean, it flipped everything on its head. And it was so emotional because we've been watching this show for 2 years. And for it to arrive to this point, it was just brought tears to your eyes. And so it brought tears to my eyes, to the main character's eyes, and to the side character's eyes. And when the other characters were crying, one of my students said, "Well, why is everybody else crying? I don't get it." And so they just couldn't relate to how powerful this I guess this moment really was for those characters. I don't know if I'm expressing that right, but we had discussed this on the phone, that the emotional connection is just not there because, like we talked about, a lot of time is spent on the screen. And we had also discussed that, the loyalties and the relationship building, speaking face to face with people is really just not there either. And so that decreases the emotional IQ of those individuals. So my experience in that regard has been very interesting, to say the least. But I think that we're going to start to see a major shift with Gen Alphas. And I did observe them while we watched some movies in my class, and they got into it. They were like, "I really like this," and they were strongly opinionated about things. And I like people like that. I like fiery people who are very opinionated, so we can have these lively discussions and stuff like that back and forth. So that's where I kind of land right now, but time will tell how things evolve in the future.
Well, that was a very clear answer to my question, because I can totally relate to everything that you just said, because the generation grew up with social media and devices, and with kind of the protocols of developing a profile that has a relationship versus being a person who's developing a relationship with other human beings. And this Gen A that's coming, the realization of and the lessons from that, and you being a teacher can recognize the lack of emotion and sympathy and apathy with that generation. You can now be a little bit more proactive in infusing a little bit more human interaction between these young Gen A's. And I think that's a lot to do with parenting and teachers who, I mean, if you think about it, it's like stick your kid in front of a TV, and then the internet comes. You stick your kid in front of a smartphone or a computer or a thing. So that became like the new babysitter, and all that comes with that is how you learn to interact with other human beings. And I think it's coming around full cycle to where the the computer and the phone and the video games are being extracted in those fundamental years of developing those relationships, to have that face-to-face interface, that face-to-face interaction, to develop those relationships. And what makes relationships really strong is those moments of vulnerability, those moments that you share with someone else, to trust them, that these emotional vulnerability that you're going through, they're going to safeguard that. They're going to, you know, help you through that without exposing your vulnerabilities and your insecurities to the rest of the world. So it, I think you're sitting in a really, really good spot as a teacher who can recognize both of those generations, and through showing films and seeing the emotional reaction, the emotional investment that Gen Z doesn't have and Gen A does have, it will allow you to put together a strategy on how you want to insert that into your students, because it's really key to experience that in those grammar years, so that you have some lessons and some experiences that, hey, it's okay to connect emotionally with another human being and share their joy, share their sadness, share their pain, share their anger, have them do the same for you. And over the long haul, you will develop much stronger relationships, and you will have relationships that has actual real loyalty versus, fake loyalty, or, something that you hide behind with a profile.
Yeah, most definitely. And the thing that you taught me when we spoke was, don't ask them the question, do you relate to the characters? It was, why would the characters make this decision? And that was a huge shift for me, because then we went into the discussion about, I think it was like 400 or something, 400 characteristics
Mhm.
of each like person when you're developing a character for a film or for a book. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. And so it would be really helpful to, instead of just asking those like really simple questions, do you relate to the character, or how do you relate to the character, and then they respond, well, I don't, then take that moment where the characters were crying together in that show El Internado, and say, well, that's a good question. You noticed that she was crying. So why would she be crying? Why would this moment be affecting her so much? When you think about everything that's been going on in their lives, and who she is as a person. And so that right there, I was like, oh, I can take that and run with it.
Oh yeah, yeah, because that's the true analyzation of why you are emotionally invested in the first place. If you can answer the why of that reaction, it kind of forces you as the student to come to your own conclusions logically and logistically, why a character would do something or why a character would not do something. And I'm sure you've experienced this. I mean, me as a writer, director, actor, unfortunately, because I'm on the creative side of creating content, I also can see the elements of frustration when I see a story break down, or some inconsistency, or a gap in the plot. Most people sit back in a dark theater, they're watching the whole thing to be entertained and to escape.
Mhm.
And it serves that purpose. And you miss all of it. There might be something in the film that doesn't resonate with you and you can't put your finger on it, but you walk out of the theater and somebody says, "Oh, what'd you think of the movie?" I'm like, "Well, the action was great and it was cool, but there was something about it, I can't put my finger on it. I just wasn't really feeling." Where people like you and I will actually catch that moment. The thing is, why did that character make this choice, which is an obvious route to harm's way, versus making this choice?
Mhm.
And if you don't create a real justifiable motivation for them to think this is a better idea than this, that's what happens in your head when you're watching it. That's the thing that you walk away with. Something doesn't make sense. It's like it was cool and it was exciting, it was thrilling, but I don't know. It wasn't really as clear a story, or there was something about it I just wasn't feeling. And usually that's what it is. So when you break down the why, and even when you're acting, when a director is telling me, Here's your motivation. You don't want to do this, but here's the motivation why you have to do this over this. Now I have an idea of, why I should take the worst choice of all these choices and the motivation behind that. And as an actor, I have to convince the audience that this idea is way better than these 10 others. And sometimes you don't find the answer to that for another 30 minutes or an hour or even an hour 15. Maybe in the third act, it makes sense why I made that decision here. But even while I'm making it, there still has to be enough credibility in the story and the dialogue and the acting and the action for the person sitting in the audience to go, huh, okay, let's see where this is going to go. And now they're hanging on the decision that they never would have made, but they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you made it for a reason. So now I'm going to stick around to see why. And, when you are writing those scenarios, you have to have those thoughts too. You have to think about, why this character would do that. And that's why I like developing 400 characteristics, because there could be something in one of those characteristics that make you go, oh, this characteristic trait is why they made that decision. And it will play out later in the movie, and the audience will have that answered in Act 3. So this is a very, very exciting industry. The Writers Guild's on strike right now because of some of the terms and conditions that they need from the studio. Also, this new AI that's coming out is threatening to writers. So I'm very excited to see where this is going to go and how this is going to land. As a writer, actor, director, this definitely affects me 100%. But it kind of rolls into what we're talking about as far as how to take a story, write it into a screenplay, and have actors and directors and cinematographers make it like a credible thing on the screen. And I'm excited that you're here with me, and we can kind of chop up some of these ideas and some of these theories.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And everything of what you said really resonates with me as well, because as you were speaking, I was still thinking about that one moment in that show where the student made that comment. And it wasn't just that moment. There was many others that were very similar to that. But when you started to ask, why did she make that decision, or why did the character do that? I started to think to myself, way back in this character's history. And then I had an epiphany that I should have connected and connected the dots, help my students connect the dots in that moment. But I didn't realize it until just now. So I appreciate your feedback in that area and your expertise in developing these stories and things. And you're absolutely right. When you, for me, I had one of the best teachers in college for it was a short story literature class, and towards the end of the course we watched a lot of film. So once we learned how to analyze stories, particularly short stories, then we went into film, and we watched Dead Poets Society. We watched all kinds of movies. They were so good. And one thing that she would do is she would teach us not to critique or not to judge what we saw, and not necessarily to label what we saw with judgment. I think that's why people are so sensitive to labels, because they think that a label is someone judging them, but it's really not, at least not the way she taught it. And so when we were watching these films, she would pause at these, because she knew what was coming. We hadn't seen the movie, but she would pause at these, certain moments, and she would just ask us, what do you see? What do you see? You're looking at the screen. What do you see? Oh, we see a tree in the background, or we see a red shirt or something like that. So we weren't labeling it, or not judging it rather, but we were just labeling what we saw and just making notes of that. And we wrote down, she said, write down every single thing that you see. And there was a reason why she had us do that, because those elements that we saw, right, they were all there on purpose. They're put in the scene on purpose, 100%. And so that would connect back to other things. And then once everything came full circle, and she helped us close the loop of it all, we were like, like mind blown, right? So that was a really, really powerful experience that I had. And I just wish that I could, be half as good as she was, because she was just absolutely phenomenal in that area. But I'll never forget that experience, and I hope to bring more of that to my students for sure.
That's cool. When you're watching a movie, and based on this conversation, I hate to be a spoiler for you, but from this day forward, you're never going to watch a film the same way.
She said the exact same thing in class. She literally said she said, "You're never going to read the same way, and you're never going to watch a movie the same way ever again." And it was true.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a spoiler because you now are pulling back the veil of screenplay writing, movie making, and you get a chance to see some of the secrets behind the curtain, and they're not always perfect. And because of that, there's your radar is going to be open for some of those elements, and you're going to catch them. One of the reasons why a scriptie is important, and the scriptie on a set is the person who logs and take pictures of every single thing, so that when you're doing multiple takes, the consistency of the background, the wardrobe, the people, the positions, the amount of food on a plate, the amount of liquid in a glass stays the same from take to take. And sometimes some of those details fall through the cracks,
Mhm.
and we catch them simply because we now have that eye, and sometimes it's subconscious, and we catch it, and then we end up finding it in the reverse shot. So have you ever watched a film or a TV where the front shot, the glass of wine is half full, and then when they cut to the over the shoulder reverse shot, the glass is full, and then
No,
they cut back, and then
I've
it's
not
half full?
personally done that. No, I've never noticed it before, but I have seen TikToks of other people who do notice things like that. And I always find them like really entertaining and stuff. But the things that I've noticed is that like I like to watch movies multiple times. I just have that like obsessive personality that when I like something, all I want to do is just like binge and gorge on it until I can't take it anymore. Like that's
Right.
how I am. So I'll watch the movie a billion times over, and I love watching it because I'm intentionally looking for those little details and those little clues, especially if I was tripped up, especially if I was tripped up in the movie. So, like for example, the directors of God, what was that one movie we just watched in class? It was, oh, I don't know if you probably know the name of it. It was about this girl who was really like techie. She had her computer with her, and her mom had a boyfriend who was in jail, and he kidnapped her and like took her to Colombia or whatever. Does that story ring a bell to
Hmm.
you?
Hmm.
Okay. So anyway, we're watching that movie, but the movie goes so fast. I mean, it's like click, 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 click. It's so many cuts and just different things. And because the director had a really unique take, it's all taking place on a computer screen. So there's all kinds of pop-ups and windows and tabs and things that are open, and it's really, really well done. Even one of my students made a comment like, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen a movie that was made like this," because it's told through the lens of a computer screen, and it's just really good. So anyway, I was tripped up a few times thinking that one character was the bad guy or the bad woman in this case. And, I have to realize sometimes that the directors are intentionally setting up the scene in a certain way to get you to come to the conclusion that they want you to. So, it's really more about not asking who is the bad guy. It's what does the director want me to believe about this person or whatever's going on. And so I got tripped up because I really did think that this one particular character was involved in the whole conspiracy, but she wasn't. She was actually one of the really good people who was trying to help. And when I got tripped up, I was like, oh no, I got kind of mad. So I got kind of fired up. So I watched the movie again and again and again, and I looked for those clues to what led me to draw that conclusion, and were there other clues there that if I had paid closer enough attention, I could have seen that, this character was actually the one. And they were all over the place, and I was like, what, how could I have missed that? Like, and it's so obvious once you see it, you can't unsee it. So it's
Right.
kind of like you with the glass, because like with the glass half full or the glass empty, things like that, you're never going to watch that movie and never not notice that.
Right.
So, and it's going to bug you incessantly. So yeah, it's like, yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Fun stuff. Fun stuff. So, what are some of your favorite movies that are out right now? What's your all-time favorite movie?
Titanic.
Why?
Well, it came out on my birthday, and that was a long time ago, 96, and I was little at the time, but I just loved the movie because Leonardo DiCaprio was like my favorite actor, and I thought Kate Winslet just did a fantastic job. I was also fascinated by the story of Titanic in real life, and I just thought it was a wonderful movie. And so Leonardo DiCaprio just played like just their love between each other, the spark there. It was just something that I think every girl can relate to and wants to have in their life. So, for those reasons, I would say I absolutely loved it. And I can't remember the guy who directed it. What is his name? Not Steven Spielberg, but James Cameron.
Yeah.
James Cameron. He's just a great, great actor. And, I loved one of the things that I appreciated about the movie was the meticulous detail that he took in recreating the rooms and the bathrooms and the dishes and the just different intricacies and little knickknacks that were there and stuff like that. And, when you compared an actual picture of the Titanic on the inside in some of these rooms, and you compared it to a scene that was cut from the movie, it was like, wow, they spared no expense to make this movie really come alive. So I think that's part of what I liked about it.
Nice. That's very cool. So we had talked about possibly doing your own podcast. If you were to do your own podcast, like what would you talk about? What would be some of the segments or the topics you would have on your show?
Well, I'd probably be more like you in the sense that I would be interviewing people, because my topics are pretty cut and dry, I think. Once the story is told, it's told, and once the information is out there, it's out there. It's really not that hard. So I don't feel like I've got a ton to say personally about writing books in the industry. Now I could talk about education all day long. I could probably do that, but then I'd probably get myself in trouble. So I could do that. But as far as writing books, it's pretty cut and dry. So if I were to do a podcast on that, then I would probably take more of an interview role where I'm interviewing authors and, people who want to have their books advertised to the world and, help tell their stories.
Cool. Well, I want to get your opinion on the OWL app, and I want to find out, how we can, stay in touch with you. So, tell me a little bit about what your take is on the OWL app and what you like about it, and how you're using it.
Well, the OWL app is awesome because it aligns with okay, this is going to sound egotistical and I don't want it to sound like that. The OWL app is awesome just because it is. But what I like about it is that it promotes people talking to each other. And like you mentioned, AI and different things like that, I'm certainly not threatened by AI, not in the slightest. But the thing is that I like the fact that I can pick up a phone, have someone call me, or I call them, and just network. And that's really where my heart is at. It's in the people. It's in what the people create, not what AI uses, what people have already created to create. So I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in people. So I love that. And the conversations that I've had with the individuals on the app have been absolutely fantastic. Every single one of them, every single one has been really interesting. And I think that the app I think it has tremendous potential. One thing that I would like to see are two things. The first are I'd like to see some heavy hitters like on the app, some real like celebrities on there or some singers or whoever, but some real heavy hitters. Now we do have a lot of great people who have like 13 million followers on their YouTube channel or TikTok or whatever, and they are on the app, and that's a heavy hitter. Like that's a big deal, to have somebody who's got 13 million followers on the app. That's great. and it brings a lot of clout and a lot of credibility to the app, and it attracts a lot of people to it. So I'm very happy about that. The other thing that I'd like to see, though, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, but I think that people, I'm just going to be honest, but I think that people get a little greedy. And what I mean by that is the calls are 10 minutes. They're 10 minutes. And you can obviously extend the time, by 5 minutes or 10-minute increments. But I think some people get greedy and they set their prices really high, like $50, $25, $50. Some people are $100. And I'm like, no one's going to pay $100 to talk to you for 10 minutes. That just makes no sense. So in their eyes, they're thinking like quantity over quality, but no one in their right mind who doesn't even know you from Adam is going to spend $50 to call you and talk to you for just 10 minutes. That doesn't make any sense. So I think that if for me, I've been very successful on the app. My call volume is very high, but that is because I set my rate at a reasonable rate, and I'm changing it every now and then. I go from $2 and I'll set it to $1, or I'll set it to $4 or $3 or something like that. And I set it very, very reasonable. But again, it's for 10 minutes, right? And so because of that, I have people calling me a lot when I go live. And that makes me very happy because I'm connecting with all these people. I'm still making money. Obviously, I've made over $100 on the app, and I just started. And so because, I keep my profile and my price very attractive to people so that I'm approachable, then things like this happen. I get to come on your podcast. You know what I'm saying? But if the price is too high, you would never have called me if my rate had been $49 or something like that. So, people have to see the bigger picture and not be all about the dollar.
Yeah, very well said. So come in. I think my next guest is coming in. She's still not here yet.
How many minutes away is she?
I'm tying up here. I'm done in like 60 seconds. I'll call her.
I'll just have to get a lift right now.
Yeah,
right at the choice point.
Let me call her. Give me 60.
A few minutes early to make it.
Yeah, that was the idea. That was the idea. So give me 60 seconds. I'm about to tie this up. So yeah. So how do we get a hold of you on the socials, or through the OWL app is fine? How do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, if you want to download the app OWL, it's as PodBrother said. If you want to go through the OWL app, it's OWWLL, and just download it. And then if you'd like to, I get a little bonus out of that. If you'd like to, you can put my referral code, and my referral code is writing. WRITING, writing. And when you put that in there, you'll have your profile approved through the app. You can make calls, and then all you have to do is toggle your profile so that you become an expert if you do want to become an expert on the app. And then we can call each other back and forth. And to be able to have access to experts in industry like AI, digital printing or 3D printing, comedians, social influencers, marketing experts, banking experts. My mom just joined the app actually the other day, and she is a human resources specialist. So she teaches people all about human resources, which is crazy valuable, the information that she can give. So call her direct. The fact that you can just call someone who's an expert in the industry, a global leader, in what they do, an expert, and speak to them directly, like that is invaluable. So yeah, hit me up on OWL.
Awesome. And you can find me on OWL. My referral code is comedy. Real easy.
There you go.
Nikki, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate you. It was very inspirational and motivational for me. I'm excited to call you back and get some meetings going for ghostwriting, find out what your rates are, and just get my book going. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. You can catch me at podbrother.com. You can catch this at podbrothernation.com. And whatever you do, be nice to yourself, because if you're nice to yourself, you're going to be nice to other people. Thanks a lot, guys.